How do you know if you're making the right decision? Welcome, everyone, to the Cope and Chill podcast, where every Tuesday we explore practical approaches to self-care and self-healing for better emotional and mental health and well-being. And I'm your host, Ron Martin. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to start by telling you some exciting news. This podcast has been a labor of love for me. It's been such an enjoyable experience, but it's been a whole lot of work. Not only to produce the podcast itself, but doing the work to promote it so more and more people become aware of it. And part of that work involves creating additional forms of content and expanding to different platforms. Well, as you may have noticed, I have closed each episode by encouraging you to go to our website, copeandchill.com. Well, admittedly, I had fallen behind in its development. So if you went there before today, you weren't seeing what you expected to see. But I'm very happy to announce that the website is finally up and running as it's supposed to be. You can go there and find all of our episodes, and coming soon, there will be access to other forms of content. So stay tuned. In addition, I have also created a Facebook page called, you guessed it, the Cope and Chill Podcast. And on that page, you will not only find another way to access our podcasts and the other forms of content coming soon, but it's a convenient way to interact and provide us feedback on how we're doing, things you'd like to see more of, and how we can best serve you, the listener. So thank you again for being with us. And as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe or leave a comment wherever you are listening to us from. A few weeks back, I met a very interesting person. Her name is Anna Hindell. And Anna is a Gestalt psychotherapist and yoga instructor. This combination really intrigued me. As I've conducted more and more interviews, one of the most prominent themes that comes through is the wisdom of the body. I think for most of us in Western civilization, there is such an emphasis and value placed on mental or cognitive functioning, using our brains to think, process, calculate, apply logic, and make decisions. But what so many people have shared with me through my interviews related to this podcast is that our bodies have information that can help us make decisions too. Some of that information is more obvious and so routine we don't even think about it. Like being thirsty means that we should find something to drink, or being hungry means that we should find something to eat. We know these things to be true because our body is communicating to us through sensations and feelings, and when we intuitively respond to that information, our thirst is quenched and our hunger is satisfied. But our bodies have information for us when the decisions are much more complex, involved, and important too. This information, if we listen, can help us out of situations that are not good for us and usher us into situations and places that are truly best for our well-being. But how often do we stop to listen to what our bodies have to say? Are we sure that if we did stop to listen, we would understand what it's telling us? After all, the body does not communicate through words. It communicates through sensations and emotions. So how do we tune into these sensations and emotions? And how do we use that information to make our most important decisions in life? As I mentioned, Anna is a Gestalt psychologist. And for those who don't know, Gestalt psychology involves helping people tune into the present moment and the emotions and sensations they are experiencing in their bodies to learn exactly what they are trying to tell them so that they can make their wisest choices. And, as I mentioned, Anna is a yoga teacher. And yoga fundamentally is about working with and becoming aware of the body, how it moves, and how it communicates to us in the process. Through both of these approaches, Anna teaches people how to make big, important decisions by learning to connect to the body and then interpreting what it has to say in order to make the choices that are right for them. Anna works with teenagers, adults, and couples, addressing issues of depression, anxiety, life changes, and eating disorders. She is based in New York City and is a graduate of the Gestalt Associates, the Center for Somatic Studies, and the Iyengar Institute of New York City. Anna's focus as a Gestalt therapist is helping people connect what is going on in their bodies with what is going on in their minds. For me, this was such an intriguing and thought-provoking discussion that began to open my eyes to all of the possibilities I was missing by using just my head and not my body in making decisions. My hope is that you find this discussion as interesting, useful, and personally challenging as I have. Please keep listening as we explore how to know if you're making the right decision. And as always, please like and subscribe and leave a comment wherever you're joining us from. Thank you. And now, here's Anna Hindell. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cope and Chill podcast. I have Anna Hindell here, and she is a Gestalt therapist and yoga teacher, which is a very interesting combination, which is why I wanted her on the show. Hi Anna, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it?
Hi, Ron. I'm really happy to be here. So yes, I'm a Iyengar yoga teacher as well as a Gestalt psychotherapist in private practice here in New York City. So I see people individually, couples, teenagers, adults, for anything having to do with psychotherapy, a lot of somatic orientation. Essentially, I help people connect what's going on in their body with what's going on in their mind, help people figure out how they're stuck, how to get them unstuck, and essentially what is it that they want more out of their own life that they are not getting.
And why is it important to connect with your body in trying to determine what it is you want in life? How do the two connect?
Sure. Well, our body is this huge container of information that often as humans, I included, don't tap into because we walk around with our mind and think that, that's the truth. And I'm identifying with the mind, yet the body is actually where we get that information. So I help people slow down, get them to feel what they're feeling in their body through different ways. Body scans, just starting to cue them into noticing their breath, noticing different parts of their body as they speak. And in bringing them to the awareness of their physical body gets them connected to what's happening in the body. Now we think about the obvious things, a growl in the stomach, dryness in the throat. Okay, that's letting us know, our bodies are letting us know we're hungry, we're thirsty, then we have to move forward with that need. But when things get complicated, do I take this job? Do I not take this job? Do I move into this apartment? Do I not? Do I have a kid? Do I not? The questions get bigger and there's not a clear answer. It becomes more of a decision. Our bodies are still giving us information. And it's this wealth of knowledge to tap into that to help us make decisions by sensing, oh, I feel really relaxed when I think about moving there, or I feel really warm when I think about moving in that direction. But so many of us have become so conditioned to not paying attention to our body for various reasons. That could be trauma, that could be an eating disorder, that could be getting praised our whole life for our intellect. Various reasons why we just value the mind as the way to guide us in life.
Yeah, in our society, there is that encouragement and the reward for logical thinking, right? So much of our schooling is focused on that. What is it that our bodies can teach us in terms of decision making? What does being in touch with our body have to do with decision making?
Well, not only does it give us the information, as in the sensory information that we need to make decisions, but it brings us into the present. And that is also a wealth of information that we can become aware of what comes up for us in the present when we're faced with big decisions. And then we become aware of how the mind brings us to the future, to the past, usually a combination of both. So say you're faced with some decision. Do I go on this trip or not? Your body might give you some knots in your stomach, but then as you tune into it, if you stay with your stomach, with the sensations, you're going to become aware of what that brings up for you. And you're going to start to notice your mind, whether that's, oh, if I stay with my stomach, I realize I'm nervous about this, and I'm nervous about this in relationship to the past, because when I went on a trip in the past, this happened, or, I anticipate this in the future. So the body is this, it's always there for us. It's happening in the present. And the best way to make decisions is from a calm, neutral, relaxed state in the present. That's ideal. And our bodies have that information all the time.
So this is really about trusting your gut, right? This is about trusting your intuition or learning how to connect to your intuition. Is that fair?
It's true. It's true. It's about connecting with your intuition and so much more. For example, I, as a yoga teacher, particularly an Iyengar teacher, which is an approach that's very much about alignment,
What was that again?
precision,
You said
alignment.
Angar? No,
Oh, I know. Some people think it's Iyengar, Iyengar,
okay.
named after BKS Iyengar, who
Okay.
died about 10 years ago.
And what is that?
And it's he's systematized an approach that's really based on classical yoga poses. We use a lot of belts, bolsters, blocks, wall straps. Basically this approach that makes yoga accessible to anybody. No matter how you show up, there's always something you can do. We can get you into a pose, whether you're, because everyone's got something going on. Mm-hmm. So that's another, therapy is one tool. It's one way to start to explore what's happening in my body, but then also getting on the yoga mat. Here's another subject. You're on the mat, you're with your body, you're with your mind, you're getting into these twisted up poses, mm-hmm. and then you're told to breathe and relax, yet support yourself. So here's another way that you have to work out what's happening in your mind, which is telling you this is too hard. I don't really want to do this. Yet you have the resources, the strength in your legs, the extension in your arms to hold yourself up. Mm-hmm. So that's another way to not necessarily decide on whatever is going on in your life, but to get to know yourself and learn about yourself. And in yoga, there's this niyama svadhyaya, which is self-study, one of the precepts about just being with yourself, the subject of just knowing yourself. And, that's one thing to learn. Oh, wow, when I'm faced with a really challenging pose, I just want to get out of there. I just want to go do something else. I just want to go have a snack or go call a friend. Yeah. And when you're on the mat, you're there and you're committed. And then you start to see your mind and you see your tendencies. And yes. It can be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, as you say, that it's like your impulses start revealing themselves to you, and that is part of getting to know yourself, like what you think is comfortable, what you think is uncomfortable, right? And I guess when I started practicing meditation about 7 years ago, it became clear to me that developing a relationship with yourself, which is kind of what you're talking about here, is really the same as what you would do in terms of developing a relationship with others in many ways, right? And that you're trying to learn yourself, in this case, your dislikes, your likes, the things you're passionate about. I mean, some people may know what their passions are, but others may have trouble connecting with that and understanding what they are. But it sounds like through these different experiences, some of that may be revealed to them in many ways.
Right. And so the more I think someone, I mean, I can speak for myself. The more I have cultivated a relationship holistically with my body and knowing how to support myself on a very literal way from for example, I had a hip replacement 3 years ago. I was a gymnast. I've had so much wear and tear. I have since learned through PT and through yoga, and I actually do Pilates too, how to support my hips, my midsection in a way that I feel stronger. And this really does affect the mind as well. It's not going to make that divorce easeful or some really difficult grieving you go through, pleasurable, but what we need in life is enough support to go through whatever we're faced with moving forward. And I like to think of it as like gathering as many tools as we can, because we never know what we're gonna face. So knowing ourselves from the inside out to then contend with our day to day and hopefully find a little bit of lightness to our step, have a little fun.
Yeah. And that's really, in a lot of ways, the essence of self-care, right? It's really tuning into your own needs and giving yourself the support you need when you can. I'd like to go back to decision making a bit and talking about how connecting to your body can help you in decision making. And I think before we began the show, we talked a little bit about how without this connection, we may end up getting in our own ways a lot of the time. Can you talk about how that shows up? What does it mean to get in your own way, and why does being disconnected from your body actually contribute to that?
Sure. I mean, we're all familiar with a lot of pop psychology terms. I mean, some I'm not such a big fan of, but things like self-sabotage, or everyone loves a good procrastination moment. So a little bit about Gestalt. It's very present centered, as in the idea that your history is important, but you bring it all to the present moment in the relationship, in the therapeutic relationship with me, for example. So a lot is emphasized on building trust so that we can have a very clear back and forth, which happens a little bit over time. And so it's very experiential. So for example, I might ask someone a question. How do you feel about your brother-in-law? And I might notice someone will hold their breath and then give some answer. And we explore what comes up for them in their body. Okay, I feel a tightness in my chest. And now this might take someone many months of therapy to actually identify what's happening in their body, because sometimes that's a whole learning curve. A real
and could I add to that too, just from my own
Yeah.
personal experience, that in going through what I've been through, sometimes the feeling is so intense, right? It's so solid and intense that you don't want to touch it, right? It's hard to sort of unwind it too, right? And get to the bottom of it. Especially as a man, I think, there's already challenges with us connecting with our emotions anyway, but that knowing that feeling's there, understanding what it is, why it's there, getting all that curiosity going about what you're feeling if you're not used to doing that, can be quite a challenge and may take some time to
Mm.
build up to that. Just from my own personal experience.
Yes, and I love that you said the word curiosity, because that's a big cornerstone of the work I do with people, is to start to plant some seeds of curiosity, because that's a way of looking at what's happening for you without judgment. If
Mm.
you can stay curious and explore and play and feel. So,
But before you move on,
yeah.
so but because what does judgment do? So if you're exploring this, what does
Mm.
judgment do to your experience or to you if you're applying judgment there?
Right. Well, it can do many things. One, it can shut the whole thing down. The shoulds come up with the judgment.
Yeah.
And whenever shoulds come up, I think, well, whose voice is that?
Yeah. And when we
Who's
say
saying
shoulds,
that?
it's SHOULDS. That's what we're talking about. And I have a lot of experience with shoulds. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one cornerstone thing about Gestalt therapy that people might know something about is the chair experiment.
Mm.
And what I might do with a should that comes up is uh, bring it out. Okay, let's look at that should. You shouldn't do this. You're not good enough. You're going to fail. And then we put that person, that voice, that whatever that emerging voice is, into the chair, literally a
Mm.
chair, a couch, a seat in the
Mm.
room. And then I help set up a dialogue, and I have you speak to that should
Mhm.
and embody yourself as you're speaking to the should, and then get up and then become the should, because
Mm.
the should does come from you. And what we
Yeah.
call that is an introject.
Mm.
So an introject is, you could say it's a message that was given to you at an earlier time in your life that you weren't able to actually chew on and digest, think it through. It's it's usually a should. It's a
Mhm.
rule. It's a, you
Mhm.
should do this. So you start to learn, like you're a kid, don't get your sneakers dirty. You
Mm.
shouldn't get your sneakers dirty. So then now, when you're an adult
Yeah.
and you're still now navigating in the world, and you don't want to get your sneakers dirty because it's chronic, habitual,
Yeah.
out of context and out of awareness, we got to work through that should.
Yeah.
You're not kind of owning um and living in the way that these are now your shoes and you get to live the life you want to wearing them,
Yeah. I'm
being
laughing
who's.
because I'm thinking about my own experience and I think I was just going through this the other day and I was changing my clothes in my own bathroom and I was thinking to myself, "Oh, well, I shouldn't hang my pants on the back of the door. You need to put them away." And I was like, "But this is my house. I can do that. I can do what I want in my house, right? I can hang them on the back of the door."
Mm-hmm.
But there was something in my
Right.
voice that was or a voice in my head that was telling me, it's like, "No, no, no, you shouldn't do that," right?
Uh-huh. And a lot of the, sometimes, those lessons are good. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, we want to preserve our pants and make sure, you don't want to iron them next time you go hang them up. But when, they become things that are um not not really useful,
Mhm.
uh you shouldn't eat that piece of cake. It's bad. Putting
Mhm.
moral judgments on
Mhm.
food, and um you shouldn't go out during the week because you have work tomorrow, and this is what you were taught.
Mhm.
So it, in a lot of ways, what I end up doing with people is not really teaching them, but working with them to take responsibility for whatever they do.
Mm.
Like
And
taking a hunt. Yeah.
it seems like you have to become aware of it too, because I think so a lot of times those as you kind of described the situation in growing up earlier, it's like I always likened it to like computer programming. It's like your brain has been programmed by your parents and what have you. Or maybe I'm sorry, this may have been from a different conversation. I just had so many this morning, but
That's
but
okay.
but the but I think that, when we're growing up and we're having those shoulds implanted in us, through our environment, through our teachers, through our parents, and what have you, it becomes a bit of what I call computer programming. And so becomes things that we do sort of unconsciously as adults without thinking. But the emotion is there. The emotion is there of maybe it's shame or whatever it is that's telling us we should not do that kind of thing, right? But it seems to me, at least in my experience, that that first step was learning to become aware of that, right? Become aware that those emotions were there, because I just thought it was just programming. You just did it automatically.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
and then after connecting with them, I could move on to the other steps. But
yeah, awareness is always first.
yeah.
It's like we have to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, everything about it before we decide to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in Gestalt, some approaches call things defense mechanisms. We call them creative adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea that we're animals in the environment and we're always looking for stability and equilibrium. But when, say, you're a kid and your parents are fighting chronically, about to get a divorce, and you've learned, oh, if I'm quiet, it's a more peaceful environment at home. So that's a way that a child will creatively adjust to their environment so that it's more peaceful and balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when the child grows up and is constantly quieting themselves in a chronic, habitual, out of context and out of awareness way, I'm an adult, I'm at a work meeting, and I just am so quiet because that's what I was taught.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's time to look at that. And of course, the first step is awareness. Let's look at all of the ways in which you were taught. What does that do for you? There's some secondary gain. So we don't want to just take away the pieces that have built the person to what they are in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like I want to respect these defenses. I want to respect the ways in which we've learned to navigate in the world.
Yeah. It so and this is something that I did in our conversation, because I kind of had you talking about things that were sort of taking us away from the original question that I asked you, which
Yeah.
was, connecting to why connecting
Why do
to
we?
your body and decision making is important, or why if you're not connected, how it can lead to indecision. But I think what we did was we spent some time understanding that emotion is behind it, right? And that connecting with the emotion is often done through being aware in your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so going back to, so I had a experience this weekend where I was trying to buy a car. And so you talk about the sensations of nervousness. I was trying to become aware of those while I was going through the car buying experience, going through the sensations of dread, and I just don't like the process. But as I interacted with some of the sales reps, I found myself saying things that I maybe 10, 15 years ago would never have said. And I think it had a lot, because maybe I was more um disconnected from my emotions. Maybe I was feeling more shy or inhibited about expressing what I felt. But as I've learned to become more connected to my body and the sensations and pay attention to it as much as I could in the moment, I found myself saying things that I probably wouldn't have said, and being a bit more firm in the negotiation process where I probably wouldn't have previously, where they'll challenge me in the discussion and I'll just say no. And one time I actually got up and walked out of the conversation because I didn't feel like I was being treated fairly. And I wouldn't have done that 10 years ago. Right. But in hindsight, I'm like, what did I just do? It just felt so natural. And I didn't do it in a rude way, but I was just doing it in a way that I felt like I was protecting myself and standing up for myself.
Yeah. And I would say that it sounds like you had a lot of self-support for what you needed to do yesterday. And it sounds like you feel good about that interaction.
I do feel good about it. I got a
A
car
little bit
and I like the car.
surprised.
So, and I
Yeah,
feel like I got
great.
the price that I wanted. So But I think it goes back to what we're talking about in terms of learning to trust your body, the wisdom of your body, and be in it in the moment, which took a lot of, mental sort of gyrations to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do. I had to keep retuning myself
Mm-hmm.
back into my body to make sure I was paying attention
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
it. But so there's where in my case, I feel like trusting my gut actually helped. Now, something else I've dealt with is being a perfectionist over the years. And I know we talked about perfectionism and how much of a challenge that can be, especially when it comes to knowing if you're making the right decision. This also leads to the procrastination, right? If you're a perfectionist, you're like, should I make this decision or that decision, right? So how do you know if if you're making the right decision if you're a perfectionist?
Right, right. I love this because I've been told I'm a perfectionist and
Mm,
I might still be in it a little bit if because I go, well, I'm not a perfectionist. I make mistakes all the time.
yeah.
And I've learned and have some humor about it now that it's not about not making mistakes. Perfectionism is all about the state of mind.
Mm,
I have to do the best. I
mm,
have to I have to get it right.
mhm.
And there's this idea of rightness
Yeah.
and most decision and so I think there's a bit of a shift of framework that from right to the best decision for me.
Yeah.
Most decisions as we get older are, and I say that because I have small kids, and your decisions are much smaller when it's like, what do you want for dinner? It's like that's their
Right.
decision.
Right.
Do you want to play inside or outside?
Right.
But now, do I get a car? Do I move? Do I go to graduate school? These huge decisions. And um, if we're expecting that there's a right decision on the other side of this, whatever we're contended with, we're not going to be satisfied because it's as if we're then going to arrive at some place
Mm,
likely, and sometimes we do. Sometimes there
mhm.
is a destination and we get there and then okay, it's done and we move on. But most of the time decisions are a 60-40, 70-30, 80-20 if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And it really is getting in tune with what does my gut say, what is my mind saying? Is the chatter going because I'm anxious, or am I paying attention to my body?
Mhm.
So some of it is the framework of there's not a right, there's a writer for me. So that's
Mhm.
going to help you orient to get back into yourself and
Mhm.
take off the um, attention to the externals. And then from there, the self work begins.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't say that it's easy. It can be sticky, but that's the working through. And if you think about it with the curiosity, okay, if I make this decision, what will that be like? If I make the other decision, what will that be like? And a little
Mhm.
bit of play and a little bit of allowing yourself to try something
Mm.
and then see how it goes. Because even if something is really big, like getting a new car, you know, there's always presence. And if the car doesn't work out, you're going to figure out what to do in that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a key lesson that's taken me a long time to learn is that even if you make a decision, there really isn't such thing as a permanent decision in almost every case, right? Maybe in
Mm-hmm.
some small cases there is, but really you have a chance to course correct or undo or um maybe choose a different path after you've made that decision, right? There's always something you can do afterwards, and being able to trust that it's and opening your mind more to the fact that it is more of a process than just that single, because I used to put a lot of pressure on myself about making a decision, and that
Mm-hmm.
decision, like you said, has to be right and perfect and whatever. And then as I've gotten older, it's like, well, what is perfect or what is right? And
Mm-hmm.
where I am now is, and going back to the experience of buying the car, is I guess the best way I would describe it is what's the decision that's most in alignment with me? And when I say that,
Mhm.
what I mean is I'm feeling, I'm checking in with my body and I'm feeling all the way through that I'm aligned from head to toe in terms of my head is saying yes, my body is
Mhm.
feeling good, right? There's alignment. And that makes, and so when I was saying those things that I was surprised I was even saying, I was in that alignment. I was in the moment. I was in alignment, and I was just like, it's just going to come out because it
Mhm.
feels right for me. Right.
And do you know what you did differently yesterday? Because it sounds like you showed up in a very different way than perhaps in the past.
Yeah. And I've been trying to ask myself that question. And I think where I am on that is, it's a really interesting question because I think
Mhm.
there's always this voice of nervousness and anxiety that's always been present, that's always caused me to vacillate on decisions. And for some reason of late, and I've been meditating a lot more. I've been trying to really feel the underlying sensations within my body and really trying to connect with what I believe is my intuition. And as I've done that, and I've just kind of tried to quiet everything else around or inside me and just really listen for what comes up, or feel what comes up. Um, I think rather than paying attention to the anxiety or giving the anxiety any kind of fuel, I think that's what's different. It's
Mhm.
sort of shifted, right? I'm
Mm.
shifting away from giving energy and
Yes.
attention to the anxiety and focusing and
Mhm.
trying to be quiet and still and listening for what comes up or feeling for what comes up in my body. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that it took you a while to
Yeah.
get there because it's not a, yes, I got that. It's a little sticky. It's an experience
Yes.
that can sometimes be hard to put into words because
Yes.
it's a going in, it's a feeling, and it's an awareness of the chatter in your mind, which, listen, I got it too. It's really loud, but then there's what you do with it. And I'm like, it was an interesting weekend. I was at this yoga retreat upstate with my teacher, and it was a Buddhist center, and there was no Wi-Fi. And besides the yoga sessions, we just went to our rooms, and I had my journal and some articles, and it was like my mind, the more quiet it was, my mind was really loud. And knowing myself and with that awareness, I had to put it in its place of like, okay, I know that you're just going to
Hmm.
do that thing.
Hmm.
And I'm just not going to pay attention to that right now.
Yeah.
And that I think also comes from just awareness of yourself,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
also the discernment of, okay, I feel grounded in my body and I'm okay in this moment, even if my mind is telling me otherwise,
Yeah.
because that's just a pattern of mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say that my caveat to everything I'm talking about is trauma work, because that, if someone has been through trauma, and in the trauma world, we say the big T's or the little T's, the big traumas or the small ones that kind of can uh, chip away at us on a daily basis. Um, that's an experience where you're pretty dissociated from your body, and you can be. So that's a different, that would be another way of working and
Yeah.
creating a safe container to very slowly, through some somatic and present
Somatic. Yep.
centered work,
Yeah.
to get back into, I feel my body when I'm having a feeling,
Yeah.
and I can be here in the room with you, Anna, or whoever the therapist is, or whoever the person is.
Yeah.
And it's like taking what we're talking about into a very slow process,
Mm.
really slowing it down and really paying attention.
Yeah. Well, so Anna, so let me ask you this. So we've talked a lot about how to connect to your body, understanding the emotions, feelings, sensations that go through your body, why it's important to pay attention to them, how they can help you make decisions or how it's involved in the decision-making process. What are some practical things that people can do to get in touch with their body on a day-to-day basis?
Right. I think on the very broad stroke practical is pausing. Even if it's just starting to setting your watch 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like pausing before meals, feeling what you feel, just sensations, not analyzing, which can be hard for some people, especially the perfectionists. Am I doing this right? Just feeling. I like to take some of my clients through body scans just at the beginning of sessions, feeling your feet, feeling your knees, your seat and your couch, like anything, through the whole body, including the face, the throat, the jaw, noticing your thoughts. Some of these really basic, which are not easy, by the way, but basic scans to just start to bring some awareness into the body. And that can be, I'm
Yeah.
walking to the subway, walking to your car, feeling your legs, feeling your arms swing, starting to just bring the awareness to how you move in the world, how you take up space, because all of these things start to create feelings.
Yeah.
And we have a whole history about that. So I would say pausing, interrupting whatever your daily routine is to wiggle your toes, feel your stomach, feel your breath. Take it further, start doing some kind of mindful movement class. But I'm gonna like yoga or Tai Chi. But what I will say is that you have to enjoy it. You have to love it, because if it becomes a should, then it's just a drag and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It can't be this thing that I'm going to do because I think it's good for me. It's like we can start that way, but if you think long game, this is for life. This is about you knowing yourself and something that you can take with you. Very opposite from like the diet mentality. And I'm giving some of these examples because I work with a lot of people with eating disorders, which is so on and off. It's such an on and off mentality, the diet culture. But I think that this is sort of a for life thing. So anything that for some people, it's like drinking more water. Oh, I'm thirsty. I never realized how thirsty I am. So things start to emerge and start to pop up when you pay attention.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really a tremendous skill to learn to become aware of your body, listen to it, and honor what it's telling you, because the body does communicate to us. We just have to understand its language and then respond to it and care, and then that's the essence of self-care is listening to our bodies and working with it. Well,
right.
Yeah, I was going to say, Anna, so I think we're about out of time, but I really appreciate you joining me here today. This was awesome. I think we got to a lot of helpful topics. I know certainly it's been helpful for me, and hopefully it's been helpful for our audience. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you. Can they work with you if they wanted to, or
Sure,
how would
right.
they
Well,
find you?
you can find me on www.annahindell.com. I'm on Instagram, Anna Hindell Psychotherapy. I'm Anna Hindell on LinkedIn and on Facebook. So I am licensed in New York. So I see people in New York. If I see people out of state, I work with them as a coach
Yeah.
because of licensing laws. But I do have a psychotherapy practice in New York, and I'm always open for questions, comments, feedback, anything. Start a conversation. I love it.
Awesome. And so there's lots of ways to connect with Anna, lots of social media presences. So this is great. So thank you, Anna, and thank you for being so patient and persistent and persistent in coming on the show here with me today. Really appreciate all of your insight and your wisdom.
It's been so fun. A pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you were able to take some inspiration or something of value from today's show. To access all of the resources and links mentioned, please head on over to copeandchill.com or our video-based podcast on our YouTube channel at Cope and Chill, where you will find the show notes for today's episode. That's Cope and Chill, CopeandDecisions.com. And for information about upcoming episodes, check us out on Instagram at Cope and Chill. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're joining us from YouTube, and leave a comment wherever you're joining us from. Please come back and join us again for next week's episode. But until then, take care of yourselves.